Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Shrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both. Hope you're having a wonderful holiday week.
Doing well, Tanya. How are you?
I'm doing well and trying to muster some spirit. But we're going to have some great stories today. Thad, can you tell us what's going to come to the cover story for this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, Tanya, this week we have a really thorough story from Klamath, which is the nonpartisan nonprofit newsroom in Sacramento, kind of dedicated to explaining California policy and politics. It's a story looking at kind of the ongoing fights over water rights on the Klamath River and its tributaries. And the reporter Rachel Backer does a really good job of kind of approaching the issue from all sides and talking to both ranchers in the upper Klamath Basin and then also tribes and environmentalists and regulatory agencies about kind of this ongoing problem where there's just not enough water in the Klamath and its tributaries to meet needs and to meet the water rights that have been meted out to various interest groups. And one thing that isn't really touched on in the story, but I guess I just want viewers and listeners to be aware of, is this is something that was addressed in the initial Klamath Accords, the initial Klamath Agreement back in 2010, which seems like a lifetime ago. It is in fact 3 different Klamath agreements ago, and now the dams are coming out, but they're coming out under a really pared down agreement that isn't as kind of ambitious and comprehensive as that 2010 plan. So that 2010 plan, in addition to like paving the way for dam removal, it would have made a lot of money available for habitat restoration projects, and it also basically included a compromise between tribes, environmental groups, and upper basin irrigators over water rights, in which they kind of had come up with this plan nobody was really happy with, but figuring out how to met out the limited water in those watersheds. Of course, that agreement died on the vine when Congress failed to pass legislation to enact it, sent all these various parties back into their corners to first come up with a new accord that also didn't come to fruition, and then finally this really pared down version of dam removal, which we're seeing now, which from an environmental standpoint, from a tribal perspective, at least in the lower basin, dam removal is a great deal, and it is an awesome step forward for the fisheries and just the watershed in general. But it still does not address this overarching issue of how much water there is and who gets what, which is continuing to be fought over with regulatory agencies and lawsuits.
And the story also kind of just briefly touches on the progress that they're seeing in the effects of the dam removal, and it definitely seems like it's a whiff in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's dam removal there's no question is going to be a huge step forward. Yeah. But it is, there are still folks facing the same kind of uncertainty as they have previously, and so we're coming out of a wet water year, so things are looking a little bit brighter than they have in some previous years. But even in what we're seeing is even in full water years, there just isn't enough water to meet the full irrigation demands of cattle ranchers and agriculture upriver, and to provide what environmental groups and the tribes feel like it's an adequate flow for fish health downriver.
Well, before we switch to the news, do you have any final thoughts about this story?
Just, I hope folks pick it up and read it in its entirety. It is, it's an issue that is going to continue to play out in the years to come, and really does need some sort of lasting resolution. So both the watershed can be healthy, and so those upriver water users can at least adapt to whatever this new normal is going to be, and whatever that entails, whether that is letting go some of those cattle ranches and letting some of those fields go fallow, or reaching an amount of water use that can meet their needs while still providing for the fish.
Okay, well, thank you for that story, Thad. And now we're going to cover the clandestine dealings in Eureka.
Yeah, so I spent a good part of my late last week and over the weekend trying to figure out what happened with Eureka City Schools. So, Eurekans, folks who read and watch regularly and listen regularly, know that Eureka City Schools has had this piece of surplus property, the former Jacobs Middle School site, which has been closed for 20 years now. But it was officially declared surplus property, maybe, I don't know, a handful of years back. And Eureka City Schools has been trying to figure out what to do with this property, has been looking to sell it. The city of Eureka was in really prolonged negotiations with the district, and they just couldn't come to agreement on the price. The district was said to be asking for no less than $4 million for the 8.5 acre site, and the city of Eureka apparently felt like its appraisals would only justify a purchase price of $2.8 million. So there was a big gap between them. And really, for the last, year or so, it's been the California Highway Patrol that has been in kind of prolonged negotiations with Eureka City Schools about purchasing the site. And their goal was to move their northern Humboldt headquarters. Currently, it's in southern Arcata. They wanted to move that to this site, which is out of the tsunami zone and has a bunch of geographic advantages for them. These conversations had progressed to the point that CHP actually had a public meeting over the summer to kind of get neighborhood input as to, if they did take control of the site, what neighbors would like to see in the new facility, what neighbors' concerns were. It actually got to the point where it seemed like at least the neighborhood around this Jacobs site was really in favor of this CHP option. Anyway, so fast forward to Thursday. Eureka City Schools agenda comes out, and on the agenda is in closed session, continued negotiations with CHP and this mystery group we'd never heard of before, AMG Communities Jacobs LLC. And the Board of Trustees voted in closed session to kind of move forward with this other potential buyer, and then in open session approved a land swap. And so gets really complicated really quickly, but the basics of it are to sell surplus property, a school district has to jump through a whole bunch of regulatory hoops to kind of govern exactly how the process can move forward. But there's a provision in the education code that allows a district to trade properties with somebody else with much less oversight and much fewer steps. And so what Eureka City Schools voted to do was to trade this 8.5 acre property of Jacobs Middle School site for a small residential property on I Street in Eureka that has 2 small residential units, and is valued. The district valued this property at about $635,000. That seems way out of line with what fair market value would be, but nonetheless, so they're trading this small property and then a cash sum of $5.35 million. So it seems this developer, again, AMG Communities Jacobs LLC, which was filed with the Secretary of State's office 2 days before this transaction was approved. And we don't really know anything about who this group is, but this mystery developer has apparently agreed to pay a sum way over market value to purchase a site. And Eureka City Schools apparently felt strongly enough about this that they not only did it, but did it in a super expedited fashion that left very little opportunity for public scrutiny or public input.
Definitely sounds like somebody was very passionate about purchasing this parcel.
It does. And, like I said, we don't know. Based on LLC laws, you don't need to disclose who's behind a limited liability corporation in California. All that really goes on the book is an registered agent who files the paperwork on their behalf. So we know that an attorney out of down by Sacramento filed this paperwork to incorporate this LLC. It's really all we know about them, But what we also do know is that there has been a lot of interest in this property outside of the California Highway Patrol. So as we've talked about on this program before, there's an ongoing battle waged on multiple fronts against the city of Eureka's plans to convert a number of city-owned parking lots in downtown and old town areas into multifamily housing units. And there's, a group, Citizens for a Better Eureka, spearheaded by Robin Arkley and Security National, that has filed a number of lawsuits challenging these city plans. And there's also a ballot initiative coming forward in November that has qualified for the ballot, which is dubbed Housing for All, but would really prohibit the city from converting these parking lots into housing projects while rezoning the Jacobs Avenue or the Jacobs Middle School campus for multifamily housing. And so a lot of our reporting on that initiative kind of initially focused on the fact that the city didn't have site control over the Jacobs Avenue. I'm sorry, I keep saying Jacobs Avenue. It's actually on Allard Avenue, but the Jacobs Middle School campus. And so rezoning it wouldn't really do anything because the city, the Eureka City Schools wasn't bound to, accommodate the city's zoning requests. But now we have this new mystery owner who has come in, and there's a lot of speculation that they might be affiliated with Robin Arkley or Security National or Housing for All or Citizens for a Better Eureka. I caught up with Gail Reimer, the spokesperson for those groups, and she said that there's no involvement, and that they were happy to hear of this land transfer, but they don't really know much more about it. So we'll have to wait and see.
It'll definitely be interesting to see who puts on their hard hats and shows up at the site, for sure.
This would be a great dramatic moment for me to be like, "'Twas I," to make my reveal.
I think if you had $5.35 million to plunk down on a property, you might not be hanging out with us. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's a big clue. Sorry.
I would hope you would still hang out with us, Jen. But the idea of a Scooby-Doo reveal is
right?
Wonderful.
Rubber mask. I want to see the whole thing.
I was just going to say, that's coming at some point. Whether it is in full Scooby-Doo fashion or it's just, the mundane fashion of applying for permits and stuff like that. But at some point, somebody is going to have to come forward and put some faces to this LLC name and come forward with some plans of what they want to do with the property.
Well, and I know that the North Coast Journal will bring us that information as soon as you are able to uncover it.
If anybody out there knows, has a line on AMG Communities Jacobs LLC, you know where to find me. Let me know.
Thad pulling up in the mystery van.
I wish news reporting was that rewarding, Jen.
I know.
Well, we are all very thankful for your efforts. And Thad, thank you for bringing us this continuing unfolding situation. And I encourage everybody to pick up this week's North Coast Journal and read the entire article. And with that, we are going to turn our attention to the wonderful Jennifer. And she brings us a wonderful, heartwarming story this week.
Yeah, I have been waiting to bring this story forward for a while, but it's been a really busy time for this family. So you may recall back in April, there was a fairly dramatic high-speed chase following an alleged assault and armed robbery at the Bayshore Mall that on its way, another alleged hit and run took place, and then they smashed into another vehicle on Harris and Dolbeer, and then there was gunfire, and police ended up shooting both suspects, who they say emerged from the vehicle with rifles, etc., and just chaos. Well, crouched over in the other vehicle just yards away. And when you look at the picture that Mark McKenna actually took some great photos of when this happened back in April. When you look at the photos, the vehicles are really close together. And the red truck that police, that sheriff's deputies pulled up to, and like they were firing at the truck, right next to it was a family. And that family was Ronnie Warrison and his 3-year-old son at the time, and his sister-in-law. And they were in there. The sister-in-law received some really terrible leg break injuries. Ronnie had an eye injury, and his son, fortunately, was unharmed. But it threw their whole family into chaos. First of all, it was a terrifying incident to endure. And at the same time, Ronnie's wife, Kamali, was nearby and saw the, flashing lights, heard the sirens, and could not get to her family. It was like a whole terrifying thing for this family. But it got more complicated because Ronnie has been a cook for 23 years. He's been a Chinese chef for 23 years. He started out as a busboy working in the same restaurant as his dad, you may recall, Hunan Plaza. And he ran the Hunan restaurant in Eureka. But the injury that he sustained, which was an ocular socket
orbital fracture.
Was really dangerous. And there was also like a shard of glass or something from the accident that was embedded in there. And he had to be flown to UC Davis to be treated. And at some point they told him, listen, you're going to need surgery for this. And also we think you're going to lose the vision in that eye, which is, terrible and frightening. But for somebody whose livelihood is cooking in a kitchen with knives and flames and, high speed traffic in a small space, having that loss of depth perception and not having vision in one eye is just dangerous. And he really had to stop and evaluate, his whole life. So, he and his wife sat down and they talked it out, and he ended up selling his restaurant to his brother. And then, great news, it turns out that his eye somewhat miraculously healed. And he did not need this surgery, and he did not have the loss of his eyesight hanging over him, but he also did not have a restaurant anymore. And so, as he put it, that was the first thing he thought of. He was like, okay, but what about work? Cool, I have my eye back, but now I need a restaurant. And so he and Kamali found a place. You may recall, these many years ago, do you remember where Mekong used to be? It was later Green Lily. It's an Old Town, little restaurant. That's the spot they've moved into.
That one passed me by.
Yeah, well, it came and went. But now it is the somewhat goofily named Walk In, Walk Out. That's right. We're still doing Chinese restaurant puns. Yes.
I love it. It'll never get old.
I know. I just saw a picture of a mall Chinese place that was called Pick and Choose. So anyway, Walk In, Walk Out is their new venture, and it's been open since the end of October. And it's really interesting because, so when I first met Ronnie a couple of years ago when he was at Hunan in Eureka, which again is still open, his brother's running it with his parents, which is very nice, still a family business. He was just starting to introduce some Lao dishes into the restaurant. And I had them and they were lovely. They were just wonderful, flavorful things, and just a whole different flavor profile from Thai and Chinese and other things that are available locally. But his wife at the time was still working on getting her visa. Everything had been slowed by the pandemic, and they were married in Laos, and she was coming over, but everything was slowed down, and she ended up having their son there, their first child. And eventually she got over, she's been here for about 1.5 years now, and she is really something. he's really excited about it because he does the Chinese cooking. You know, he's been doing Chinese cooking forever. And so the menu is pretty much like 50% Chinese, but she is handling all of the Lao food. And the way that she does Lao food is a little bit different from how you'll usually get it in a restaurant in the US. In bigger cities, Lao food is catching on, and it's more of a, not necessarily a trendy thing, but in the same way that like Filipino food is coming up, Lao food is more accessible in restaurants, both mid-range and high-end. So her way of doing things, normally, like I had the wonderful luck of having Vinay Manarin translate for me. Most people, Vinay told me, do the spices and all the sort of making of like chili paste and curry paste and things like that, the sort of, imagine like the mother sauces of Lao cooking. Do that in a Cuisinart, right, in a food processor. But not Kamali. Kamali is still doing the traditional mortar and pestle. So everything is being crushed in stone. And I have to tell you that it does release the flavor differently. The kind
of course, ask any bartender.
So true. Muddling, man. But the kind of burst of flavor, the spark of the chilies and the herbs and fermented fish paste and all those things that just give you such a layered experience. Like, you know, if you were a person who orders the larb salad in like a Thai place, the flavor is very different. It's much less sweet, much more herby, and really, really fragrant. And at the bottom layer of that flavor is like the fish paste, umami. Think about it like the way that anchovy fillets or anchovy paste brings you that wonderful deep flavor in like a Caesar salad. So there's that wonderful base note. And then there's all the really bright chilies that the grinding really brings it out. And occasionally there's a whole one. Look out. And then there's the lime and the mint and all these wonderful, bright, light top notes. And it's just so much happening. And I asked her, I was like, so how do you do the meat? Because it's not quite ground exactly. It's not ground beef. She chops it two-handed. So with two knives, she's just back there and getting it to a really fine chop that's still tender, but hasn't lost the texture of the meat. Like there's still a bite to it, as opposed to the way that, you know, hamburger is completely sort of collapsed and broken down. So there's so much care that goes into all of these things. And as both Ronnie and Vinay told me, you know, when you talk to people who are like, oh, Thai food isn't that hot, you know, or you talk to someone from like the Indian subcontinent and they're like, our food is not that hot. When you ask Lao people, they're like, oh no, our food is hot. You need to be careful. And apparently when Kamali first started making food for the restaurant, then I was like, you got to tone it down for these people. Like they can't handle this. And Ronnie was like, yeah, it's true. Like when he goes to Laos, he's so used to eating in America. He's like, he can't handle some of it. But because he grew up there, their 4-year-old son apparently is like a fire-breathing dragon who can eat anything. And I'm a little jealous. But for me, the larb and the kapoon and most of the spicier dishes are kind of like at the upper limit of what I can handle and still keep my makeup on. But a couple of people have asked for things to be spicier, and she will turn up the volume on the heat for you. So just go think carefully before you do it.
This story is not only bringing us more cuisine options, but also that their family was able to actually make this dream a reality. And that's what I love for this holiday week.
Yeah, and you know, I gotta say, I love how much Ronnie loves his wife's cooking. He's like, he defers to her completely, and he's just like, when it comes to the Lao cooking, he's like, she is the star of this place. And you love to see it.
Well, I am going to go check it out, and I encourage everybody to do the same. Jennifer, thanks for that story, and that's going to wrap up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands today, or you can always find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community. Goodbye. Happy holidays.